Thank you. My name's Emmett Riley. I represent the 46th District in Norwich. I was born and raised in Norwich, proudly. This is running for my fourth term. I'm a member of the Public Health Committee, Judiciary Committee, Insurance Committee, and Legislative Management Committee. And I look forward to speaking to more people throughout the city of Norwich in the next, I believe, 28 or 7 days.
Any particular issues that you want to point back over the last couple of years that you've worked towards or worked
Sure.
on and supported?
Certainly, there's numerous ones, but a lot of the things come up because of issues that happen in current day. I'd like to say that the actions that the General Assembly took with regard to the unfortunate incidents that happened with our local municipal public sharing electric company. And we put in place certain standards that they have to meet and certain requirements they should meet, as well as an individual to attend their meetings and make sure that what they are doing as an independent independent individual to make sure that what they are doing is correct and is good for the ratepayers. Something else I'm proud of is the Gold Star family legislation that we did, passing a law that allows municipalities to allow Gold Star family members to take 10% or up to $20,000 worth of their taxable property off of the books for those families. So there are two, and possibly there may be a third family in Norwich that could take advantage of that. And I was happy that the City Council did, in fact, make that into an ordinance this past fall.
Do you have anything follow up on I know you're very well versed with the utilities matter with the energy cooperative utilities.
The public forum by the municipal advocate was coincidentally last
Last-
night,
yeah.
and I attended that, and there was one citizen who talked about how he didn't think this was far enough, that that is still allowing them to police themselves, basically. So do you have any thoughts on whether the municipal utilities should somehow come under PURA, or should there be some kind of independent review of their actions, activities?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I believe that they should be under PURA and that they should be not independent in the regard that they were. They were created, I believe, in the late 70s. Don't quote me on that, but in that sometime period. So they've been around for a long time. And as both of you, I'm sure, are aware that electric rates and how electric and what kind of power that we use as a country and as a state and as a city has changed over the time. So, coal is not as prevalent as it once was, so that's one of the changes. So there's been many changes since CMAQ was created. I do believe that they should be under PURA. What we did this year was something that happened very quickly, and I think that the Energy and Technology Committee will look deeper into that this coming session. And if reelected, I would certainly put in a bill to place them under PURA. Not advisory, but under PURA control and making sure that PURA can have a say in just how they are operating. Because
You're on the Energy Committee.
I am not. No,
You're not.
I was for one term. Yes.
Okay.
Broadening out the discussion, Quinnipiac poll came out yesterday, and the number one issue for people were the economy and job creation. Connecticut, since the Great Recession, has lagged behind its neighbors in job creation. What is being done? You're currently in the legislature. What might be done to try to get the Connecticut economy going stronger?
Well, like I said, this is I'm running for my fourth term, and when I first chose to run, I think the unemployment rate was close to 9% in this area, and it's now down to about 4.5%. So jobs have come back, and one of the big issues and things that we did in the legislature was providing a very decent amount of money to Electric Boat for a manufacturing pipeline to make sure that the jobs and positions that they have open, that we have a trained and workful skill force that knows exactly what they need. So working with EB and making sure that those jobs are filled would be something that I would continue to work at and continue to work for.
Did you support, I know it wasn't a legislative decision, it came out of the executive, but the $83 million package for Electric Boat? Do you think that was a
Oh, I believe so, yeah. I believe so because like I said, as having grown up in Norwich and been in Eastern Connecticut, Southeastern Connecticut my entire life, I can remember back. I tell you how old I am, but back in the early '90s, before the casinos and when EB was somewhat flourishing, it was a very, very quiet time around this area. There weren't that many jobs. So when these jobs came in, I believe that was a good thing for Eastern Connecticut. And I believe that having EB continue to grow is another good thing for Eastern Connecticut. And I'd like to thank our Congressman Joe Courtney as well for his strong advocacy at the federal level for EBs.
Yeah, on the economy, accessibility to college, to a higher education, is seen as one of the keys in a 21st century economy for people, not only to get jobs, but to get jobs perhaps that they can support a family with. Any thoughts legislatively as what might further be done to make college accessible? I know some states have played with the idea of making community college free to people. So, any thoughts on what might be done?
I'll say this. I live in close proximity to Three Rivers Community College, and I've seen it grow and flourish over the past, not just 6 years, but the past 10 years. I believe the leadership is going in the right direction. I believe they're working well with state government and with local workforce development agencies like EWIB and EB to make sure that the students that are coming out of those schools have the necessary skills to fill the jobs that we have in Eastern Connecticut. I'd like to see a bit more leadership from atop the governing board of the community colleges and the state universities. I think some of the plans that came forward in the past year were a little bit too broad and too widespread, and I believe the counseling board, the accreditation board came back to them and said, let's tighten this package up that you're thinking about doing with regard to our community colleges and state universities and try to work in a better position or a better way to consolidate and maybe change some back office things that could be better served and possibly save money for students in tuition. I think possibly having if you go into college in a state university or a community college, I think that they, I don't want to use the word promise, but somewhat of an assurance that when you do attend your first year, that the prices of those classes that you're taking and the tuition that you're paying stay at that level until if you stay on track to graduate, or if you stay in good standing with the university, that the fees in tuition should not go up in that time period that you're with that school. You should also try and make it a lot easier for students to transfer in between state universities and colleges, community colleges as well. There's no reason that a student at Three Rivers couldn't make a seamless transition to a state university or to the University of Connecticut. And I would also would like to see maybe a partnership with those private universities that we have many of in the state of Connecticut to allow them to transfer much more seamlessly to those to continue their education and possibly get their 4-year degree as well.
On the budget situation, you said this is the fourth term you'd be going for?
Yes.
Over the last 6, 8 years, 10 years even, it seems the state's been continually facing a budget crisis. The legislature approves a 2-year budget. By the time it's back in session, there's forecasts of deficits. There have been a couple exceptions, but by and large it's been sort of rinse and repeat, and now we see the Office of Fiscal Analysis saying whoever is elected is going to be looking at, again, $4 billion deficit over the next 2-year budget. So any thoughts of why this is recurring and what might be done to get us out of this cycle so we can have some stability?
Sure. A major thought on why this has happened, and I've written, I've taken my notes, and these are the things that I've been using throughout my time in running in the past 3. I've been knocking doors since, late July, early August. And one of the things that you go through, and I put my glasses on to see where I am here. The history. I mean, we've had 80 years of little to no payment of last administrations to fix this budget. I mean, you've got unfunded mandates that have been going on since I don't know when. I mean, they finally started to think about paying some of their unfunded liabilities in the 80s, I believe. Pensions for teachers and state employees was never touched. They've never paid it. I mean, these are things that we need to attack. And one of the things I'd offer as a solution or offer as a proposal, and obviously anything that is proposed or anything that is brought forward to the legislature has to be approved by everyone. So you've got to get, and I've learned an awful lot about how to communicate with people and how to bring people to a table and how to develop consensus, is that you have to get everyone on board that wants to do it. You're not going to get everyone, but you need certainly a majority of people to pass whatever piece of legislation you'd offer forward. And so in saying that, there was a proposal put out about possibly with the Connecticut Lottery Corporation and using that as an asset for the Teachers Retirement Board. It structured correctly, it's a public asset used for a public purpose. I think the Connecticut Lottery Corporation is worth about $5 billion. This would give an immediate reduction in the state's unfunded liability towards the Teachers Retirement Fund. It would give it security. It would also be a sustainable revenue source for the fund. It would be, I think it would work well. I mean, this is, again, one of those things that you would have to convince others in the legislature as well as whomever occupies the governor's office that this is a good thing for the state of Connecticut. I know that the CEA has come out in support of it. So I think that is one area that we could possibly help reduce some of the unfunded liabilities that the state has and that have had for several decades, many decades.
Of course, you'd have to find something to make up. The lottery money now goes in the general fund, so you'd either cut or have to raise a tax somewhere.
Sure.
I think.
Sure, but in doing so, you'd have to, it would also give you the ability to, take that unfunded liability, and then the money that they, the security that the fund would have would then increase their ability to borrow, or in this case, lower their payments back, lower the percentage rate of a payment they would have over the next 15, 10, 20 years, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Trade-off.
So, yeah. And that's the thing, it's a trade-off, and it's one of those things that if it is a better asset to be used for the state of Connecticut, because obviously the state owns it, to help reduce and make that, or choose to make that unfunded liability that much less, then it's a choice that those have to be made. And these are things, like I said, that have to be flushed out and discussed with many people.
In Wisconsin, when they face some of these issues, the Republican legislature, Republican Governor Walker,
Mm-hmm.
they had some dramatic changes in the power of organized labor, the intent to kind of force some big cuts in labor expenditures by weakening the ability of labor to negotiate. How as a Democrat, how do you view that potential? And should kind of looking at what the unions cost because of their ability to organize, something that Connecticut should consider?
Connecticut's a small state. We only have approximately 13 to 14,000 state employees. I think what Governor Walker did was a step in the wrong direction. I don't believe that the unions, these unions have given back tons and tons and tons of money. I mean, these are individuals that get bombarded with that they have too much of this and too much of that. But these individuals, work every day. They do jobs that are needed to keep this state going forward. I mean, we have people that are cleaning our roads, fixing our streets, keeping our public safe. I mean, these are people that are working on a daily basis to make sure that we have a state of Connecticut that is safe and healthy to live in. So I would speak to the unions. I mean, I'm sure the new administration, whomever it may be, will have to speak to the unions with regard to the budget, with regard to how we fix the position that we're in as a state of Connecticut. So I think that's a long discussion that'll be happening with, like I said, the new administration and the unions. I won't be part of those conversations because usually those are just executive office people. And in this past year, they weren't even part of, there weren't many people, or there weren't even any people from the legislature as far as leadership in those meetings as well. So when that came out a year and a half ago or whenever it was that the current governor made those moves and made those choices with the unions, he himself was the only one in the room with them. So, no, he and his staff, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Claire, you got a couple of things?
Well, I just wanted to, your district is different than most. You're only Norwich and
Yeah.
only a piece of Norwich.
Yes.
But like you said, you grew up in Norwich,
Oh, yeah.
lived here all along and served Norwich.
Mhm.
What do you think Norwich needs from a state legislature?
From the state legislature,
From a state legislator.
Oh,
But
yeah.
what specific? Is there something that should, whether it be funding for X project or legislation change, what helps
Sure.
the city from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's an individual that's going to know what the people want when there's a situation such as what happened incidentally with CMAC. You have to be a person that can make coalitions, work with people across the aisle, work with people within your own party to make sure that you have the necessary votes to get things done. You have to pay attention to what is happening in the city. The city of Norwich is having a bit of a rebound. I think it's doing better than it was when I was first elected, and I like to see that people in the town are doing better and well. They need an individual that's going to be with open ears to their problems, to their issues, and having a legislator that can help an individual if something occurs with them and their family, to be able to help them. That is probably, I think, the most important thing that a legislator can do, no matter what town they represent or what towns they do represent, is that when you do get a phone call, and I get them often, and they're usually from people I know, because like I said, I've lived in the town my whole life, and when they call about a telephone pole down or a kid that's having trouble at school with a certain situation that they need some guidance with, or they need to contact a certain department with the state of Connecticut, I can facilitate that. I can help them when they have an issue that may be with anything. I mean, with a dog or with an animal or a pet, or if they have an issue with an elder parent that is in need of some sort of assistance filing paperwork with whatever agency it may be that they need help with. So that is actually truly why I enjoy what I do, is that I can sit down and speak and talk to people when they need the help, and most of the times, if not all the time, actually know the people and know their families. So that's the true foundation of trying to be a good legislator and trying to do what's correct for your district.
On Norwich issues, the Norwich school system has had some real fiscal struggles. There was a significant difference of opinion between what the Board of Ed said they needed would be necessary to fund the schools this year and what the council ultimately provided. The council saying that they were trying to hold down the line on taxes. So has it been, I know Mayor Nystrom has had a series of meetings kind of talk about some of the pressures that are causing the situation. Have you been a part of those? Have you had any discussions with school officials as to what be done in Hartford?
Sure, I've attended some of those, one of those meetings. The funding from the state of Connecticut has stayed, it wasn't reduced to the city of Norwich since I have been an elected official. Actually, it's increased in many years. So that is something that I'm proud of. And unfortunately, when it comes to the city of Norwich, I don't have a vote. I can't be in those meetings. I can't make those decisions. I just hope that the individuals that are on those elected bodies do the correct thing for the city of Norwich. I think the education and what is going on in the city of Norwich, there's been an awful lot of transition. Some schools have transitioned into this school, and I think for them to stay on a strict and straight path and try to get a better foundation of what the kids need and how the kids come to school and make sure that the schools that they go to are safe, I think is something that the city of Norwich should really continue to look at and continue to work on.
Norwich is working now on a school facilities project that would require a big chunk of state money. What do you see as the future of that funding source?
I've heard that they've put a committee together I have not been contacted by anyone on the committee yet. I'd certainly be open to sitting and talking with all of those individuals to make sure if there is if the state does have the ability to bond money for them, I would certainly be in full acceptance of that, but I'd certainly want to sit down and have a discussion of what the actual plan or program would be. But education is something that I've fought for my whole life. My mother was a 30 some odd years Norwich public school teacher. Two of my brothers are public school teachers, one in the Bronx and one here in Connecticut. And so my parents always instilled in me education, and public education is the foundation of what a society should be and how a community should grow. So I would be open to helping and working with them, whatever the plan may be.
Do you see that that funding source is being threatened at the state level? Because there's of course the state budget problems and bonding issues.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's it.
I see when I see bonding and I see school construction going on, and I see things happening in the Fairfield County area. When I see schools and towns that are certainly much more affluent than probably any town in eastern Connecticut having a very, very decent amount of money going towards their schools and building new schools. And I think some of the schools in Greenwich and how those towns receive their money is unfair to, and when they have certainly adequate and very good schools as far as a building, as far as a structure, than we do in eastern Connecticut or in other parts or up in Torrington or areas like that. So I believe the funding is there, and that's one of those things that you have to go, not that the funding is there, but that the funding could be there if you build the coalition and if you build the correct relationships with the individuals that will make sure that bonding can happen or doesn't happen. So there's a whole, as I'm sure everyone is aware of when you talk about how a political system works, is that you have to give and take, and you have to make sure that what you're doing is beneficial to the people that you represent. So if there may be Project A that I know the governor wants and he's got 6 votes, well, I'm certainly going to put my hand in my pocket and not tell him where I'm going to be until I find out what's going to happen. And if I can, use that vote to afford my community and my educational system the money that they need to make it much more suitable for the children that are attending those schools.
A lot of our, talking to a lot of the particularly Democratic candidates, we've seen a lot of support for the $15 minimum wage and for paid family leave to allow workers to, that are facing a health crisis or other family crisis, to be able to take some time off from work without a big loss in pay. So where do you stand on those two?
Certainly for both. There is no reason why a corporation like McDonald's or Walmart does not pay their employees $15 an hour when you've got their former CEO buying a $15-20 million condo in a building owned by the person that sits in the White House in Chicago, and he can't pay his people $15 an hour. It's just not right. There's no reason why a person that's putting in 35 or 40 hours a week shouldn't be able to somehow be able to maintain a good living wage to support their family, to support themselves. It's just not right when you see individuals that have money becoming richer and richer and richer and making more money, and you see the poor individual, I don't mean poor, but I see the unfortunate individual going to work at either one of these large box corporations, day after day, taking the bus and not being able to provide for themselves after putting in all those hours. I think is unfortunate. I don't think that it would be that much burdensome on those corporations. I know other states have done it, and I think that we should do it. As far as paid family leave, you hear arguments about everything in our area with regard to whatever it may be. Well, this state is doing it, this state is doing it, and this state is doing it. Well, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York have paid family medical leave. It just makes for a better economic development, and if you have a family that an individual's that's sick and he can't get to work or she can't get to work, and they're going to be penalized for it. It just doesn't make sense, because then they're going to have to go back and then they may lose their job, then they'll have to find another job, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, if Rhode Island, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, they can all do it. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I have stats here, 83% of voters in our state support paid family leave. It just doesn't make sense why we don't do it.
where does the money come from? If you've got different ideas, does it come out of the pocket of the employer?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I mean, if you've got McDonald's making that much money and doing those and paying those individuals that much money, it's unfathomable that you can't pay an individual that's working on his feet or her feet every day for 6, 7, 8 hours a day for 5 to 6, 7 days a week, and they're making 6, 7, 8. No, they're making 10 an hour. I mean,
well, what about the small business guy who's a small shop and someone goes on paid family leave and he's got to put someone in there because
sure,
he's got to keep his shop open. Now he's kind of paying 2 people for a while. Maybe a big corporation, that's not a big deal, but for him or her it might be a big deal. So anything could be built into legislation to kind of consider.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I would think that it would be. You could, and this is once again you'd have to convince those that need to vote on this legislation that yes, certain businesses with a generic number of 10 people or less, or 50 people or less, you can make requirements or make additional areas where it would be less burdensome on those businesses than it would be on a large corporation. But certainly, I think I want to say I'm sure there was legislation introduced this past year or the 2 years ago that would have done something like that, similar to that would have not exempted out, but made it easier for employers with 10 or 50 employees or less to, with regard to paid family leave.
How about your position on tolls? Do you see them as necessary to raise the revenue we need to address our deficiencies in transportation?
I believe so. I mean, I've got a whole file here on tolls, and when I was growing up, within 3 miles of my house, and I lived in downtown Norwich, it's still where my parents live, or my father lives, my mother's deceased. There were 2 tolls. There was one on the Pequot Bridge, and there was one right where the police station is on 395. And if you went north 20 or 30 miles, whatever, there was another one. These tolls were here, and I do believe that we need them. And the reason why I say this is because the roads in the state of Connecticut need repair. And if on election day there is a proposal for a lockbox, which I am in favor of and which I voted for, to put that money into just the infrastructure, I am just horribly afraid to see or worry that a horrible incident, a accident of a whatever it may be, a calamity that you can name, however it is, happens. And then everyone will say, oh my goodness, we've got to do something about this. I don't want it to be too late. I don't want an individual...
What about a bridge collapse or something?
However, whatever it may be. And unfortunately, I would not want to see that. And I think that as soon as that happened, you would see members of the other side of the aisle come forward and say, I think we'd have to do it. I think we have to do something, because I wouldn't want this to happen. But what if it was someone that affected, it would be a constituent of someone of theirs, and then they thought, oh, now we've got to do something. And there are the votes for it, the state of Connecticut. I think the individuals across the state as a whole, I would say there's a larger portion of individuals that are in favor because they understand that it's not the toll. It is the definition of a toll is something that we used to have where you would stop. Obviously, everyone knows that it's changed. There, you go through them now at 55 miles an hour. I have family in Chicago that I go see often, and we go on the major highways in Chicago, and they are there, and they are as wide as you could believe. There's one that's on the the Ryan Expressway that is, it's got to be a quarter of a mile across the, because it's 6 lanes this way, 6 lanes that way, and it's tolled, and it's 55 miles an hour. And for those that are not willing or think that it is a tax, there are ways within states that do it to give reductions and to give credits to individuals that live in a state. If you live close to one and you get a reduced payment when you go through those. I believe it is, and I found that it's out this year. I have it in here. It is a West Coast state. I don't know if it's Oregon or Washington, but as everything has grown, as speaking of technologies and energy and environment, everything is on your phone. So when you go to your gas station to pay your gas, you can have your phone and swipe in, and it gives you your credit right there. I mean, there are many, many ways that have been, and this is in the state. This is a state that does it already. So I think there are ways that to appease a bit of the concerns that people have about a tax and about those that would be paying it close to their commuting travels.
Should Malloy have set aside the 10 million and have a study started?
No, I didn't agree with that at all. No. There was a large disagreement within the General Assembly across the board with that. I'm not sure why he did it, but it was his choice to do it. I know there have been studies done, actually I have them right here, and that you don't need to do a study on it. We know what it is, we understand what it is. This is a small state. I think you just have to put it in the appropriate areas. And I believe we would have had the votes, but I think some of the individuals on the other side of the aisle were strong-armed into not voting because not one of them would vote in favor of it. And so then on our side, we would have I think we had about 5 or 6 individuals that were not for it. So right then and there, it's a no, you can't go forward. Because we just didn't have the votes they have 71, all 71 are against, and,
One more thing we've been trying to ask all the candidates, because it may come up the next 2 years, at least we tried to ask, we might have missed a couple, but the question of marijuana, should Connecticut follow the lead of several other states and legalize and tax it for use by adults?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
I've seen in the 6 years of being in the legislature, we've now come to realize that it is not the gateway drug that many people believe it to be. It is a product that can help an enormous amount of people, and I'm glad that we are doing it as a state right now. And I believe that if the legislature and the administration choose to do it, I think it would be a good thing for the state. As you see, Massachusetts is about to do it. Rhode Island has done it somewhat, and I'm not quite sure, but I think if the state did it, and I'm not sure if the state should run it, if they should do it, how that should go, because obviously they've never done it before. So that's the thing that I think would be hashed out and figured out is, how would it, people say, oh, well, let's just have the state do it and state run it. Possibly, but it's certainly not our expertise. You have individuals out there that know the product better than I would think many people that are in my position. So I think you'd have to flesh out, would it be run by the state? Would it be a separate entity or a private entity that would run it for the state? Would have to see, but I believe that it should be done, yes.
Claire, do you have anything else? Because we're pushing up against our half hour.
Yeah, no.
Sports betting?
Are we done?
Sure. You want
Sure. Why not? I mean, I don't gamble. I'll go to the casino to eat and see a show or watch a game. But I believe it's something that it should be done. If other states are doing it, these are, and not to say that any of these things will save the state of Connecticut from the budgetary situation they're in. But these are things that will help the state's economy and help people with jobs and help people with going forward and making the state a better place.
Is it easy to do?
Is it easy?
Is it going to pass?
Sports betting? I don't know. I mean, I could tell you that. Well, I couldn't tell you, but I'd give you a better estimation on it on November 7th. Because I'll say this: one of the things that I do for the majority leader is vote counting, and so I go around to all of our 189 members and I ask them for their votes, and I've got my list, and and I go through. So I have the both the good and the bad of running around and chasing 90 or 89 people or whatever it is and asking what they're going to do to, finding out how they're going to vote. So we'll see. I mean, I think the candidate, Ned Lamont, has said that he would be in favor of it. And I believe that, I know that the Mohegan Sun already does it. There are people that are doing it. So I don't think it would be that difficult a thing to put in place.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.